Muy bien. Bueno, buenas noches a todas. Eh, Como ustedes saben, esta es una charla organizada por el Centro Lacaniano de Investigación en Psicoanálisis de la Universidad Autónoma de la Ciudad de México, que, bueno, estamos cumpliendo ahora casi 5 años de existencia y nos hemos dedicado a la investigación, análisis. Están llegando varios de los miembros del centro. Eh, entonces, dada la oportunidad que Richard eh, nos presentó a prácticamente todos los grupos de psicoanálisis que estuviesen interesados en platicar sobre su obra, porque no es necesariamente un análisis lo que vamos a hacer, sino vamos a tener una charla, un conversatorio con él para poder expresarle nuestros pensamientos, impresiones y demás cuestiones que se hayan presentado a partir de la película. Entonces, ustedes deben conocerlo porque seguramente lo habrán googleado, habrán visto lo que ha hecho, ¿no? Es productor, es escritor, es director y de hecho también es analista, ¿no? Tiene 25 años trabajando. Entonces, ustedes habrán visto la película, se nota que es alguien que trabaja y sin duda que eso nos va a hacer la experiencia mucho más rica porque regularmente cuando los directores de cine hacen películas pueden ser aficionados, ¿no? Como Kubrick, como Cronenberg o algunos otros, o simplemente directores a los que se les asigna un proyecto y algunos asesores que han leído algo de psicoanálisis o que hicieron el guión, etcétera. Entonces, me parece que va a ser una charla muy, muy, muy interesante, dada la versatilidad de Richard. Por lo tanto, pues vamos a comenzar. Para no hacerlo tan largo, quisiera abrir yo con una pregunta para Richard y después vamos articulando. Espero que podamos hacer una charla, pues que fluya y que se vaya articulando, digamos, hasta por asociación libre, ¿no? O sea, que vayamos pudiendo tomar las ideas, los significantes que se van produciendo y que de allí podamos tomar como para producir nuevas cosas, ¿no? Entonces, lo primero que voy a preguntarle, bueno, te lo pregunto, aquí todas estamos en el inglés como para poder entender la charla o alguien quisiera que se fueran haciendo ciertas puntuaciones para saber si la llevamos en inglés toda o si hacemos traducción, no hay ningún problema.
Yo creo que sí sería bueno un poco de traducción por
Ok,
el acento de
entonces
cada quien.
puedo hacer la pregunta en español y luego la traduzco y ya conforme él vaya respondiendo, también puedo ir haciendo los comentarios en español. ¿Ok?
Sí,
También si hay alguien aquí que hable inglés y quiera hacerla al mismo tiempo, pero me parece que eso sería complicado porque no tenemos el traductor instalado, digamos. Entonces, habíamos pensado que era precisamente una charla en inglés, pero insisto, vamos a facilitar eso y no pasa nada, ¿no? Bueno, entonces decía, lo primero que le voy a preguntar es que justo yo he terminado un texto de psicoanálisis y cine. Do you understand a little Spanish, Richard, as, or no?
Uh, some, yes. I yes, very little, but
Because
a little.
I can do in Spanish and then translate it to English. But if you understand, you can let me know, and then
Okay.
I won't repeat it.
I
Right?
I would just start by thanking Clip and thanking you, Albert, for organizing this. And thank everyone who is here attending for having watched the film and for being interested in discussing it with me. It's a great honor, and I'm very grateful.
Thank you, Richard. It's an honor for us too, because it's not.
Could you
it's not
translate that? Can you translate that? So
yes,
people.
yes, of course. Richard dice que pues nos agradece a Clip por tenerlo acá, por haberlo invitado y por darle la oportunidad de estar con nosotros y charlar un momento, sobre todo habiendo visto su película, ¿no?
Hola, oye, te quería decir que si quieres hacer primero la pregunta en español, igual yo te puedo ayudar a escribirla en inglés para Richard.
Perfecto.
Así ya él puede ir elaborando como la respuesta.
Perfecto.
Y como
Eso
que
está muy
nos
bien
ahorramos algo de tiempo.
porque tenemos acá, mira, la opción de los subtítulos, entonces te asigno a ti como...
Caray. O sea, para yo poner ahí la como traducción de la pregunta que tú elabores.
Exactamente, se puede asignar a alguien para introducir subtítulos y se van poniendo los subtítulos.
Okay. I'm going to translate the questions for you so you have time to elaborate your answers or whatsoever. Okay?
Thank you so much, Priscilla.
Perfecto, gracias, Priscila. Ok, bueno, decía que, a ver, vamos a hacer una prueba para ver si lo está traduciendo el software. Decía, ¿sí te apareció la opción?
Sí, me dice, sí.
Decía
o sea, yo ya aquí la escribo en español, ¿no?
Exactamente. Si quieres hablo un poquito
en
despacio o tú escribes rápido.
Pues ni muy ni tan, si quieres intermedio.
Perfecto. Decía que estoy escribiendo un texto, en realidad terminé de escribir el texto. A ver, dice aquí que ¿quién puede ver esta transcripción activada? Los participantes con los permisos pertinentes. Ok, a ver. ¿Ustedes la están viendo?
Sí.
Todos están viendo la traducción abajo.
Sí, sí se ve.
Sí.
Perfecto. Bueno, pues entonces puedo hablar en español, entonces para no estar traduciendo, y tú la vas tecleando, Priscila. ¿Bien? Perfecto. Bueno, decía que he terminado un texto sobre psicoanálisis y cine. Recién. De hecho, todavía no pasa a prensa, digamos, pero está allí. Y hice un estudio, pues prácticamente de la historia de esa relación desde principios del siglo XX. En ese estudio dividí, digamos, 3 líneas de relación que hay. A una le llamé fantasmática, a otra le llamé casuística y a otra le llamé teórica. Las divido así: fantasmática, esta relación de los que estudian psicoanálisis o son psicoanalistas o son creadores y de alguna forma se relacionan con el psicoanálisis. Y eso permite que introduzcan conceptos para crear películas. Y en esa misma, que se subdivide en 2, está la de los que hacen interpretación de películas desde el psicoanálisis. Una de las cosas que me parece interesante, vas un poquito lento, ¿verdad? ¿Se está trabando?
No, es que me quedé, o sea, en fantasmática, o sea, en las categorías.
Si quieres casuística y teórica. Pero voy a hacer el comentario justo para contextualizar lo que voy a preguntar. Entonces, sin duda que el estudio que hice me llevó a identificar muchas de las películas que se han hecho sobre Freud, por ejemplo, en las que Freud es un personaje. Freud as a character. Y me parece muy interesante que no hubiera películas de Lacan como personaje. There weren't no movies with Lacan as a character, as a principal character, directly.
Yes, that's true. I think, one thing is also, well, I was very lucky to get the screenplay. Betty Milan, who is a Brazilian psychoanalyst. It's really thanks to her play and novel, and she was analyzed by Lacan, that I had this opportunity. Priscilla, can you translate that? And I'll keep going.
Yes, she's translating. She's already translating.
Okay.
What was the name of this person?
Betty Milan.
Yeah, I'll type it here.
The one.
Oops.
Yeah, is there.
Fue gracias a Betty Milán que tuvo el script, ¿no? Eso es lo que dijo.
Ajá. Yes. Sí, porque está basado en una obra de teatro y en una novela, ¿no? Y que es autobiográfica.
Yes, she wrote 2 pieces. She wrote a play called Goodbye Doctor, and she wrote a novel called Lacan's Parrot, and they're both about her. She left Brazil as a young woman, and she went to Paris. Her goal initially was to bring back to Brazil the ideas of Lacan. But when she arrived and she met Lacan, it was at a moment of personal crisis. She had had 2 miscarriages, and she was separated from her husband, whom she loved very much. And so at this moment of personal crisis, she decided to do an analysis with Lacan to find out why she was alone and why her path to motherhood had become impossible.
Uh-huh. Sí, es de lo que se trata la película, ¿no? Como la vimos y de eso se trata, digamos, ahí está la sinopsis. Ahora, el asunto es que efectivamente no había películas que abordaran a Lacan. Y una de las cosas que yo sostengo en ese texto es que hay una, vamos a decir, distorsión o un uso indiscriminado, libre de la figura de Freud en las películas.
The other thing I would say is that I think Betty's representation of Lacan is very different from the representation of Lacan, which many people know from the biography by Elizabeth Rudinesco.
Yes.
It's much warmer. I relied on Betty's work, but also a close friend of mine was the psychoanalyst Alain Didier Weil, who wrote a book called Quartier Lacan, which is a book of interviews with people who were analyzed by Lacan. And it gives a much more, warm and human portrait of Lacan. And I think a couple other things make the film create a person, a warmer portrait. One is in Betty's play, there were soliloquies when the actors would turn to the audience and speak their inner thoughts. And in the film, these are in voiceover, those voices you hear. So we hear at moments the thoughts of Lacan and the thoughts of Sariema. And you hear that, there are moments when Lacan feels he's made mistakes. So he's not perfect, And the other thing is that Lacan is dealing with his own death, with the fact that he has an illness which will from which he'll die. And Betty, in fact, in the play, which was called Goodbye Doctor, I changed it and I put in the proper name of Lacan. I made it explicit that it was about Lacan. And in the play, the doctor is concerned with his mother's death. But I knew in reality that Lacan, had been concerned with his own death. So I made it that way. And so that also makes him more human. It makes him more mortal, this word, this very interesting word, mortal, which has la mort, which has death in it, right? That we're defined by death, and that Lacan is defined by his own death. So that becomes very apparent. And, I think because we have Lacan's writings, and they're very much, they stimulate us, that's why we're all here, we can lose sight of the fact, that he was mortal and exposed to death. And the film really, that's an important part of the film. So I think that too makes him more empathic, that we feel that he's someone we can relate to, and then I think you also see his passion for his work, that what keeps him going is the work, I love, there's a moment when the actor David Patrick Kelly has the Borromean knot, and he's by himself and he's playing with the knot, and then he has a thought that comes to him, and he speaks it aloud, and you get the feeling he's really not interested in his own death. He has an ethic about the work, and his focus is on the work, and that's what sustains him. And so it's I think that too is important to what is told through the film.
Yes, it's interesting because, lo digo en español,
Sí.
justo iba a preguntarte, para los que no conocemos las obras originales, ¿qué añadiste, qué cambiaste y por qué lo cambiaste? For the ones that, for the people that doesn't know the works, the original works, what did you change? What did you add to it?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that, Albert? Do you need me to? Is
Yes.
that a question to me? I'm sorry.
Yes, the question is, you have said something about it, but I'd like to know what did you change from the original works? What did you add, and for what and why? Because we don't know the play and the book, so
Right.
so you were saying that you tried to make a more more warm Lacan, right?
No, I wouldn't say I tried to. I think the result was of I made Betty had the doctor in Betty's play was concerned with his mother being sick, and I made the doctor Lacan, which is who it was. I knew that it was based on Lacan, so I named him in the title, Adieu Lacan. And I also, the most important change I made was to revert back to what had been the case with Lacan, which is that he was at the very beginning of an illness which would kill him. So I made it about his own mortality. Those were the important changes in terms of the story. The only other one I did was the introduction in the beginning. I added from the novel where she's saying, I'm not going to tell the doctor Lacan that I'm an immigrant. You know, it's not important. It's absolutely not important. And of course, it's the most, you know, it very soon becomes clear it's the most important thing. But, you know, right? I mean, you know, it becomes very clear that the prejudice that her father has experienced as an Arab immigrating from Lebanon, and who in Lebanon was there was prejudice against him because he was Christian. When he gets to Brazil, because he's Arab, everyone assumes he's Muslim. So, you know, so, and then and she says he worked like a slave. And of course, Brazil has a long history of slavery. And that too becomes part of the story in some ways.
Yes.
So it's a story about race too.
Yes.
Immigration and race, and but so I added that prologue because it really emphasized that, you know, ironically, she comes in and says, well, the one thing I'm not going to mention, the one thing, because it's not important, is very soon the most important thing. And Betty, speaking to me, really gave credit and said she had done an analysis with another analyst, and the fact that she was an immigrant never was mentioned in years, never was mentioned. And at the very beginning with Lacan, it comes up, and it really becomes a very important question for her about.
Yes. Yes. it's evident in the movie, and I think then it's almost unchanged, as you say. You only added some details, some little details that obviously they are as important as this one that you have mentioned. Le digo que en realidad pues se nota que hizo pocos cambios y que es relevante este que acaba de señalar de la raza, porque pues ella se había analizado con otro analista y no había salido ese tema, que es crucial, ¿no? Que es crucial incluso hasta el final de la película. Entonces, bueno, hay muchas cosas que decir, pero quisiera invitar a alguien si quisiera participar y preguntarle algo a Richard para que no se quede solo en una entrevista, ¿no? I'm inviting people to talk.
Yeah, to ask questions. Yeah, sure.
Ok, hola. Yo quisiera preguntar un poco a Richard. Well, Richard, thank you so much for being here for this movie. Well, I was thinking about the language that I don't know if the original novel was written in English, because it's interesting. I think maybe that she's a Brazilian analyst and go to Paris to take an French analysis, but the movie is in English, and I don't know if the original novel is in English too. So I was asking you about that, about the language, if the original movie, if the original play and novel was written in English, or if you choose, if I don't know the language for the movie. Le preguntaba a Richard que me llama la atención el tema del lenguaje, que justo se trata de una analista brasileña que habla portugués, un portugués muy peculiar, según lo mencionan en muchas ocasiones. Va a París a analizarse en francés y la película está en inglés. Entonces, le preguntaba si también la obra original está en inglés o si más bien fue una elección del director.
Thank you. Thank you for the question, Saul. You know, she says that language is very important to her. And of course, it really, the result of doing it in English is that it exists between three languages, really, between Portuguese, French, and English. And, you know, I think one of the effects is that it exists between these languages, you know. I mean, my second languages really are mainly French and Greek. And so French words and Greek words that originate in Greek and words that originate in French, I hear differently. You know, if I'm speaking with someone, even if we're speaking English, in other words, I'll still hear those words. They resonate. They have a different feeling. So, you know, and that can be also because of our religious affiliation or our family, you know, all these reasons. So it's, I think one of the things that comes up in the film is the way that any one language is between languages. So I think that's a very interesting effect. There was a very practical reason for why I did it in English, which had to do with the budget, finding the money, and you know, I'm from New York. I could work there. There's wonderful actors in New York. You know, so there was that element. And, you know, Lacan's relationship to English is very interesting. On the one hand, he really, after the Second World War, the United States really dominated psychoanalysis, the IPA, the International Psychoanalytic Association, which threw him out. And, when the influence of the US was to really medicalize psychoanalysis in a way that he opposed, his use of French, which is so opaque, so difficult, really brings attention to the materiality of language, And one of the things it was a resistance to the domination of this model that the Americans were pushing. So there's that relation to English. But there's also the relation through James Joyce, Edgar Allan Poe, the poetry, Shakespeare. And that was also very much in my mind, especially Shakespeare, especially the last play of Shakespeare, The Tempest. I studied colonialism with a poet from Barbados named Kamal Brathwaite. And the way he taught about colonialism was through the figure of Caliban in Shakespeare's The Tempest, which Frans Fanon talks about, Aimé Césaire talks about, Retomar talks about. And so, this idea that poetry had a role to play. I mean, the film for me was, thinking about the film before I made it, I think of it as a very poetic film. I think of it as a film which is very much about scansion, like meter almost, Lacan makes cuts, right? He cuts. And a filmmaker, director also cuts. But, I was very aware of the meter, of the timing. And so, for me, I was being also inspired by this tradition of poetry, which is in English, which I feel very close to. So those were some of the factors. And I guess the fourth, there's a fourth language in my mind, which is film. There's a way in which I really wanted to approach film as a language, which is to say, for example, is the materiality of the image. There's this Jean-Luc Godard. At one point, he says, on the one hand, you have the image of reality, and on the other hand, you have the reality of the image. And so I didn't want to just tell a story. I also wanted, at times to bring attention to the image. So we have moments where, it's out of focus. There are moments where the movement of the camera is not naturalistic. There was something I took from Greek tragedy. In Greek tragedy, there's something called stichomathia, which is a kind of where, there's one character and then another, but it's very, it just goes back like that. And it's not naturalistic, it's very much about the meter. So with the camera too, we did the same thing. Towards the end, there's a moment where one talks and the camera has its own movement. It's not it's not just following the characters, it's got its own. So this is a way to make, so it's not just about the image of reality, it's also about the reality of the image. And to me, that was also about like listening to the sound of the words. There's the moment in the story where she's going on about rats, and she keeps saying, rats, rat. And then she hears her father's name that she hadn't thought about for 20 years. And so it's, about hearing the words, So also in terms of film, I wanted to bring across, as a filmmaker, an experience to the image, which had a relationship to what Lacan was doing with language.
Yes, thank you, Richard. ¿Alguien más quisiera
Thank you for the
preguntar algo?
question.
Sí, me gustaría preguntar algo.
Bien,
Well, I was wondering if this that you have already said, it's related to you choosing for your film black and white and some scenes just in color, because it's really beautiful. I feel like something's really poetic, and in some sentences or phrases, very full of meaning. I remember when they say people live their lives without listening to themselves.
Yes,
That's beautiful.
right.
So it's my question.
Yes. So, thank you, Eugenia, for the question. So, the black and white, and that line of Lacan's, without ever listening. Before making the film, I looked for inspiration in other films, other works. And there were two that were particularly important. One, because it showed me what I didn't want to do. And that was a series, and it's not a criticism, but it's not what I wanted to do. It's a TV series called In Treatment with Gabriel Byrne.
Mhm.
And there, the camera is always very level, it's very level to the ground. And the camera is always at a distance. But what I wanted to do, and to me, that created the sense of a transfer of information, kind of like a respectful relationship of someone who knows with someone who doesn't know. But one thing that was very important to me, because I come out of, Greek is where I started with Lacan in some ways, reading what he wrote about the Antigone. But, one thing is like he would compare his technique to Socrates and Maieudics, where Socrates says, look, I can't, your truth. I can't tell you what your truth is. I can only help you give birth to it. He would say, I'm a midwife. I can only, so that was very interesting because it's the story of a woman who wants to give birth. So in a way, she has to give birth to her own desire, to her own subjectivity, before she can give birth to a child. So it was about, on a couple different levels, this idea, this concept of birth. And so I didn't want a level camera, I wanted transference. I wanted, we hear her talk about, she feels shame, she feels guilt, these very strong feelings. And so the example from moving images that really worked for us was a film from 1928 by Carl Dreyer called Joan of Arc, where Joan of Arc is being persecuted for her religious beliefs. And there the camera is very, it's extreme angles and it's very close. And it's also this framing that we use, which is 4:3. It's almost a square. And so that's also brings up the history of cinema. And cinema has the same birthday as psychoanalysis. I mean, they're both born at the end of the 19th century. So it was a way right from the beginning to emphasize time. And also, this framing, which is the oldest framing in film, also is so great for close-up and to get across these emotions, the powerful, so that we're very close. It's very intimate. The film is very intimate. People express this, just how close they feel to what Sarayama is going through. And it's very interesting because in a way it's about Lacan, but it's really her story. I mean, she's the protagonist, right? From beginning to end, she's the one who changes. I mean, he's like a midwife, which is very, very interesting. It's very different from ego psychology.
Yes.
And in the last time we see, a few people have mentioned, but the last time we see Lacan in the film is he's kind of tired and he's in the back, and she's kind of going forth, and because it's really she's going forth, she's given birth to her own desire, and he's kind of exhausted and in the background. And of course, the title, Adieu Lacan, it's her words, right? It's what she's doing, it's what she's saying. But this very emotional intimacy is why, we wanted to use this camera, and my cinematographer, Valentina Caniglia, and I worked very hard on that. The other thing is that we were able to shoot in sequence chronologically. Very, very rare, Usually, when you make a film, if you have 3 scenes, for example, you have 3 scenes in a bar, you shoot them all at once. Your producer shows up and goes, we can't come back to this bar to tell the story because it's going to cost too much money. We have to do them all now. But when you have a story that's only in one place, you can shoot sequentially. There are a few directors who always shot sequentially. They were Michelangelo Antonioni and Robert Altman. And Robert Altman was very close to me because I've worked a lot with one actor who was a very important actor for him, Elliot Gould. They made films like MASH and The Long Goodbye. And so when you shoot in sequence, it's great for the actors because they can really feel, they can build things in. But it's also great for the director and the cinematographer because it's like musicians, you kind of feel. I think we took more chances. I think we would have been more conservative in a way if we hadn't been able to shoot in sequence, but because we could, we could kind of, again, the scansion, the music, because another thing we were interested in is there's this American filmmaker who's best known as the writer for Taxi Driver, Paul Schrader. And when he was young, he wrote a book called Transcendental Cinema. And he said, you know, most films try to get your attention and never let go. You know, they're here, you know. And then he said, then there's other films which kind of, you know, they're here. And they kind of lean back. And he mentioned Vittorio De Sica and Bresson and Ozu and Chantal Akerman, you know, and that these filmmakers, like he mentions one scene, it's in on YouTube, there's an interview with him where, and he mentions in a movie called Umberto D by Vittorio De Sica, there's this young woman, you know, she's obviously very poor. She's in a kitchen and she's trying to light a match. And she tries once, doesn't light. She tries again, doesn't light. Tries a third time. And, you know, and Schrader says, you know, Hollywood film, it would be gone. But when you start to look at it and you spend time, you suddenly, it makes you start to think. And to me, that was kind of also analogous to psychoanalysis, you know, where you say you're analyzing a dream, you know, and it can be, maybe it's not the big story of the dream, it's a little detail, you know, and it's the little detail that leads you to something really important. And so this sense of pacing and time. So we tried to, you know, Valentina and I, you know, we're always saying, go give it time, give it time. Don't worry, you know, we're just gonna like take our time. And, you know, so the pacing, there's not a lot of, so it's very slow in a certain way, you know, and you have to go into it. And there are very few, mostly there's some camera moves. There's one overhead shot, one. There's one scene that's handheld where the camera's on Valentina's, you know, and that's when the fetish, when she loses the fetish. And so, you know, it's, if you consider, you know, that now we live in this world, which is where images are everywhere, moving images are constant. You know, you go into a restaurant, they have TVs with moving images. On our phones, there are moving images. You know, it's constant. So in a paradoxical way, a film can almost be, you know, a place where time is sheltered. They used to say, you know, film was where you could escape from time. But now it's like a shelter for time, you know, that we live with so much disruption, you know, of random disruption, that it's possible for film to be a place where time takes on, we become conscious of time. So in that way, you know, I think it's not only making this film, it's making this film now. You know, it's this film at this time, which has a particular, you know, interest and significance.
Yes, Richard, it's pretty interesting because
Thank you, Eugenia.
thank you.
Thank you.
I think that there's a mix or there is something in between the form, the film form, and the story. I think that is designed in a didactic order. Le estoy diciendo que pienso que hay una relación entre la forma y el contenido, pero que pienso que está estructurado en una forma didáctica, because there is an approach to concepts. For example, this sequence where the patient passes from the imaginary transferences to the symbolic one with that zenithal camera that you divide in two, and she goes to the coach when she assumes herself in lack. She's suffering there. She talks about sex. It's the first time, right?
Yes.
So I think the film maybe in contrast with another films about psychoanalysis, because you surely know the film by Chantal Ackerman, the A Divan in New York,
Yes.
right?
Right. Yes.
It's a comedy, right?
Yes.
It's
Yes.
a comedy, and it talks about Lacan, of course. But I hadn't seen a movie that had very specific ideas about theory, and
Right.
in a very didactic way. I think the film shows the concepts in a way that is really clear, really evident, really easy to understand. Obviously, if you are aware of that,
Mm.
and it can be used to teach psychoanalysis, not in a vulgar way, because I think many films about psychoanalysis are very reductionist, are very
Yes.
they always use concepts in the wrong way. So I don't know if this is in the play structure as the movie, or if you tried to show how the psychoanalysis functions, how it works in between the pathologies and the problems with the patients. I mean resistance. I mean everything that she does has a meaning, right? When she loses the eye,
Yes. Yes.
it's like she doesn't want to continue, and then she loses the eye, and then when she dreams Lacan dead, she fantasizes with his death, because she doesn't want to go on, right?
Right.
So
Yes.
it's really evident, really clear, but in a good way, not in the wrong way, as to make only only for the entertainment sake. It's
Yeah.
too. I think it shows that you are really aware of that, of psychoanalysis.
Thank you, Alama. Thank you very much. One of the things that got me interested at the beginning was when I directed a staged reading of the play. It was for an audience of psychoanalysts, Lacanian psychoanalysts. And I thought to myself, if you could think of two audiences, one would be people who know nothing about psychoanalysis and people who know a lot about psychoanalysis, that it was interesting for both, that it was both rigorous. It could be both rigorous for an audience of people like yourself, who are deeply knowledgeable about Lacanian psychoanalysis, and it was very, it wasn't difficult, I mean, Lacan is known for being opaque, so difficult, right? And yet when you, again, my first interest in Lacan was from practice, the idea of practice. And then when you showed his thoughts and his ideas in the context of practice, they were easily understood in a way. So that was one of the exciting possibilities of making the film, that I could make a film where that would appeal to an audience like this one, of people who really know the work of Lacan, and to people who really, know very little. And, where it becomes clear what he's talking about. It's not, at least on some degree. And yes, absolutely, the moment where she's talking about the sex of words, and this leads to, Lacan again helping her to hear what she's saying, says sex. And at that point we go overhead, and there's the splitting of the screen, which for me was also, the signifier, and the signified the Saussurean symbol, this relation of language to sexuality. So there's that cut, and then she goes to the couch, and then really the work really begins. She really completely, the whole dynamic really changes, and the dynamic for the camera changes too.
That's a very good idea, Richard, because I didn't see until now that division, that splitting as the bar, right? I already thought that was the time or the moment when she gives a value to the word itself, itself, to listen to herself as the unconscious, and she
Right.
stops. She
I think
stops.
that's right.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's also a correct interpretation. I hadn't thought of it, but I think that's true too. I mean, it's the splitting, the divided subject, the unconscious. Yeah.
Sí, le decía a Richard que me parece genial esta parte que nos acaba de expresar, de que esta barra que se para, ¿se acuerdan en la secuencia donde ella pasa corriendo al diván y se acuesta? Que es la barra de Saussure, ¿no? Pero significado y significante, digamos el significante arriba ya en el diván, digamos si lo viéramos así gráficamente, que me parecía que también era el momento en el que ella empezaba a darle valor a su palabra, pero a su palabra en ese sentido de la transferencia simbólica, es decir, ya no la transferencia imaginaria a Lacan, ¿no? Ya no el valor de la palabra de él, ya no depende de lo que él dice, sino que en ese momento empieza a escucharse, ¿no? Y empieza a otorgar el valor a la palabra en sí, y no a la palabra de Lacan como sugestión o como terapia, o etcétera, ¿no? ¿Alguien más quisiera hacer alguna pregunta?
There's some questions also in the chat room, I think.
Ah, sí. A ver. It's a
comment. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I could translate it. It's charming a movie. She wished that the analysis could be short, and the patient acting her expressions as the story goes. She liked the acting, and she thinks that for moments they express some concepts or explanations of what happens.
Here's a question, right?
Yeah, she says that's the procedure of your work, Richard. She asks, or he asks, I don't know, that why is it a device closed for watching the movie and comment it. I think it's because you are showing the movie in all over the world, and they have to pay. So it has to be closed because you can't open the movie for free for everyone. Yeah.
Yeah, it was, we trying to make, to keep, to make a living, we have to make back the money that was put into the film. And that's very, very difficult, we're not nowhere close to it. But it's great to, with a small film like this, you try to find an audience, a core audience, a beginning audience, which is very passionate about the subject. And that's been great for this film. I mean, people are, really passionate about this subject, and they're very connected. I mean, it's very interesting also is Godard said that we once lived in the world of the Lumiere brothers, who imagined the first film they ever did was these workers leaving a factory, and they imagined an audience sitting together, all in a room like a cinema. And whereas Thomas Edison, imagined a peep show, and just looking into one eyepiece. And in a way, with our cell phones, we've gone from the world of the Lumiere brothers sitting in a cinema more and more to this world of Edison, where it's, one little peep show. But I think one of the things too that's been so great for me in showing this film, Adieu Lacan, all over the world, is it's not only Edison. In other words, I'm meeting with groups of people, so it's so there's both. It's not just people who are atomized. It's not just people who are separated. It's also people who are in a particular location, who work and discuss together. So so there's also a sense of a group, and so there's that dynamic as well. And so for that reason, these screenings have been, really a tremendous source of support beyond the whatever part of the money we were able to make back. There have been, for me, intellectually stimulating and a great sense of support coming from them.
Yes, yeah, Richard, thank you. Maybe I have to explain the discount you made for us, for the people to understand too. Richard respondió que tiene que recuperar el dinero para la película, entonces por eso se tiene que cobrar, y por eso se ideó este dispositivo de hacerla en grupos. Originalmente eran grupos de 20 personas mínimo. Entonces él cobró por 20 personas, pero nosotros abrimos un espacio de 65. y además no cobramos nada, es decir, esta sesión es gratuita. Entonces, digamos que el procedimiento es así porque tienen que recuperar el dinero y tiene que ser cerrado forzosamente porque tampoco puede hacer así conferencias muy grandes. Pero hay que señalar que efectivamente nosotros abrimos ese espacio gracias a que él estuvo dispuesto a regalar 45 lugares, ¿no? Solo se pagaron 20. Bueno, ¿alguien más quisiera hacer algún comentario? Yo quería preguntar algo, digamos, lo digo en español y luego se lo pregunto en inglés a Richard, que tiene que ver precisamente con las reflexiones. Ah, sí, claro, Priscila, está bien. Puedo hacer la traducción ahora. Sí, con las reflexiones y las inferencias que hace Lacan, que de alguna forma me parece que son, y eso es una pregunta, me parece que son más del orden como para que funcione la historia, ¿no? Porque ni modo de que se quede callado y nosotros imaginemos. Es decir, por eso y para que sea entretenida un poco la película. Pero si nosotros lo pensáramos como lacanianamente, tendríamos que entender que esos son sustitutos como de la construcción de los casos, ¿no? Es decir, de cómo Lacan va construyendo ese caso, no en ese momento está haciendo esas inferencias y esas reflexiones necesariamente, sino que va construyendo, pero también va dirigiendo una cura, la va orientando dependiendo de lo que él va reconociendo ahí. I'm telling them, Richard, about these reflections and inferences that Lacan does when he's listening, or even while he is listening, that if they are in the original works, and if you think that they are for entertainments, for the sake of entertainment, or for making the story work, more than being really truthful, as I think, but I want you to let me know if you don't think that they are substitutes of case building. I think maybe in the story, Lacan is constructing or building the case in between the words of Seriema, and if not, it shows to a cure direction, because it's like step by step, and if it doesn't, even shows an ethic of psychoanalysis, because Lacan in your film, Lacan is very precise with the good saying, with the precision as a virtue, as Miller says, right?
Yes.
He's always trying to take Seriema to the good saying. Yeah, and I think it's something that is very precious, or very interesting, or very valuable for Lacanian psychoanalysis. Don't you think
Yes.
so? Yeah.
Yes. No, I think his comments, Eugenia mentioned the moment where he says, people live their own life, their whole life, without ever, hearing themselves. And he's very much playing this role. And she's very much, it's interesting, the term Annalise Sand, right? The person really doing the analysis is the patient, is the person who goes to do an analysis. Someone said, that in psychoanalysis, it's you pay and then you work. It's kind of an unusual, right? It's kind of unusual in that way. You pay the money and then you do the work. And the money plays a real, very interesting role, the way that, that he really, it's very interesting again in our time when, for example, I buy my coffee, I just show my phone and it takes the money out of my phone, so money is disappearing in a certain way. And he insists on, it's very vulgar. He puts out his hand, pay me, pay me. But it has a purpose, it makes it not a love relationship in a way, or she says, oh, why do I have to pay like this? And he goes, you just want a love relationship, and this kind of shows you has this other dimension. And the money shots have a similar role in that way, but it's very ethical. He's not there. He has a gentleness about him, but he also has a harshness too. But I think in the course of the film, you see how they, they both reflect an ethic. His being harsh is not arbitrary when he remembers that she has to pay, like, well, you forgot, no, you owe me twice as much, just twice. You didn't pay me the last time either. But on the other hand, he's also has, David Patrick Kelly, the actor who played Lacan, fell in love with Lacan. He loved playing that role because actors often play off of each other. They're like musicians. And so, so you have a very senior actor, David Patrick Kelly, who's probably best known for Twin Peaks now, David Lynch. And by the way, you ever notice that David Lynch and Lacan both buttons, they button their collars. They're both, got it.
Yes. Like
right? Yeah. So, he loved playing that character because he could really work on listening to what Ishmenia Mendes in the role of Seriema and her performance. And she's, a relatively new actor. And so, the kind of work together to collaborate was really wonderful for both of them. And this importance of listening and the ethics of psychoanalysis. And I think there are real lessons from it. I think it really reflects, Betty Milan is herself an analyst, and this is her story, and she was analyzed by Lacan. So I think it's I think there's a fictional element. I have Lacan dance the capoeira. I don't think he ever really did,
that's a great sequence.
Oh, I love that. So there is a fiction, but I think it gets across a truth about timing and, also the performance of Lacan, that Lacan, and I think I wish I was there with you. I'm not, I wish I was in Mexico, I wish we were doing this not over Zoom. And that Lacan was a real performer, he had a real physical presence, and the way he projects his voice, all of that was important in some way. So it was a wonderful character for David Patrick Kelly to play, and I think it's all. And then when he dances the capoeira, you hear him talking about how the analyst can play different roles and things, you know. But you know, again, and it's as someone said, it's very rare that you see a film which is a successful psychoanalysis. I mean, it's from the beginning into the end. So it's yeah, I think it does have. I didn't plan it this way. I seriously didn't plan it this way. But it does, a number of analysts have mentioned that it's a great teaching. It's a great tool for teaching about Lacanian psychoanalysis.
Yeah, and that thing that you mentioned is the fiction ingredient, I think. No, it's successful because it's fiction, right?
Yes,
It's not really that way.
Right. The end of an analysis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's interesting because nobody's saying you are warning from the beginning that it's a fiction, right? So,
right. Yes.
So and that's very, very important
I think so.
In movies like this. It's very important because people always thinks that the movies are like reality, even if they say that they know they can difference, etc. That's not true many times, and principally in biopics, they think that all the experiences that the character is showing us they are real. It's as it happened, as it really happened. So it's really important to tell people that things are not that way.
Right. No, I think one of the, I think also that's partly why among many psychoanalysts, Lacanian psychoanalysts, have felt very close to the film, because it's about subjective truth. It's not about objective truth. We're not telling, you know, the camera isn't standing away. It's not about objectivity. It's about on every level, it's about subjective truth. You know?
Yes.
So,
estábamos hablando justo de la verosimilitud y la veracidad, digamos, y que entonces en la película se trata de ser verosímil y de hacer que la historia pues sea entretenida y además que funcione, y no necesariamente los casos son así en la realidad, ¿no? En realidad no hay, en ninguna película se puede ser fiel a la realidad por los compromisos, por las renuncias que se tienen que hacer en aras de que funcione la ficción. Entonces, hay que tener cuidado, hay que tomar la película como una película que habla de Lacan y es precisa en muchas cosas. Eso lo decía Richard hace un rato, ¿no? Él trata de ser riguroso, de tomar los conceptos. Hablábamos justo antes de esta cuestión de eso, de cómo hay allí una ética del psicoanálisis, hay principios, la precisión, el bien decir, todo esto que sí es lacaniano, pero al mismo tiempo, pues hay una resolución de un caso que también hay que decir, es un caso que duró 6 años, por lo menos de acuerdo a la película. Entonces, bueno, 6 años no son poco tampoco, ¿no? Pero, digamos, pero la película parece que lo hubiera resuelto así en 10 citas, ¿no? Cosa que no sucede, nunca sucede así. I'm telling about the treatment. It's a 6-year treatment, right?
I think that's right. Yes.
Yeah. Lourdes says that 6 years are a little and are a lot.
Yes.
Same time. Yeah. So it's truth. It's the truth. But we have to be aware of that. ¿no? Tenemos que estar advertidos de eso, tenemos que saber que el psicoanálisis no es como en las películas, ¿no? It's not, psychoanalysis is not like in the movies, right?
Sí,
Right.
sí, sin duda, no es como en las películas. El psicoanálisis en vivo, ¿no? O en la realidad, ¿no? El psicoanálisis es algo muy singular, es algo que ocurre en uno por uno, y que, bueno, en un tiempo, digo, la película es encantadora, ojalá sí pasaran los análisis, pasaron 4 sesiones, se hizo. Sin embargo, en algunos momentos, los que atravesamos por una experiencia de psicoanálisis, nos damos cuenta de eso. Hay una intervención y mueve cosas, la posición subjetiva cambia, se construye un sujeto, se va construyendo. Me gustó la película, me gusta platicar con Richard. Les digo, no sé inglés, lo siento, sorry, no sé
Pero
inglés, no sé
podemos
hablar inglés,
traducirlo.
I'm sorry.
pero
I'm
bueno,
sorry.
sí, pues sí entiendo un poquito de lo escrito en inglés, pero bueno, y sí quería comentar eso, que en cuanto al tiempo, evidentemente es un tiempo ficticio, y el tiempo que transcurre durante una sesión es un tiempo cronológico, es un tiempo lógico, es un tiempo de cada uno, de cada historia, y bueno, de momento yo me sentía como en mi análisis, ¿no? En ese diván, con las expresiones del analizante, sus expresiones del analizante me encantaron, cómo iba angustiándose, cómo de pronto se veía como en otro momento, lo que justo comentaba por escrito, y que sí da una idea, pues, de lo que es el psicoanálisis, no sé si lacaniano, no sé si Lacan, ¿no? Porque, bueno, Lacan, por ahí hay algunos libros, por lo menos un libro escrito por Jean Alouche, que habla acerca de algunas ocurrencias, de lo que ocurría en los análisis con Lacan, con sus analizantes, con sus pacientes. El hola Lacan, claro que no, bueno, hay muchísimas cosas, pero bastante interesante respecto a esta analizante en particular. La cuestión de la migración me parece súper interesante, los idiomas, ¿no? Que ella señala mucho, ¿no? Sobre su origen. Muy interesante, pues, una película de 1 hora con 32 minutos que me pareció que era como de 20 para mí, ¿no? O sea, se me fueron rapidísimo. La película no cansada para 1 hora 30 minutos en un solo espacio, ¿no? En un solo espacio. Me gustó la película, gracias Richard Lewis por mi participación, gracias.
Gracias. Gracias, Lourdes.
Well, Lourdes talked about that she liked the movie, and she was talking about all the treatment, how hard is the treatment, how she identified with the protagonist, the character of Seriema, and she mentioned one thing that I think that is very important in the movie. That is the subjective position and the subjective involvement.
Yes.
Right, Lacan is very precise with that. He's trying to put Serema in this uncomfortable. To make her feel uncomfortable, to put it in a situation as she had no other option than talk and then make something with the words that she has said. She has already said. I think he's always pushing Serena to that subjective implication, right?
Yes,
He's always trying that to do that. Siempre está implicándola subjetivamente a Sirena, o sea, tratando de que se haga responsable de lo que dice. ¿No? Desde el principio le dice, no eres culpable, you're not guilty, you're responsible. No eres culpable,
Yes.
eres responsable. Pero por eso mismo los cortes, that's why the cuts that you were mentioning at the beginning of the talk, Richard.
Yes, and the cuts which have an analogy, you know, cuts, of course, are a source of analogy between Lacanian psychoanalysis and cinema, you know, where we both we cut, and I was very aware of that in making this film. Albert, I'm starting to fade here. I have to be up early tomorrow.
Yeah.
So
no problem, Richard. We understand that it's 3:30.
3:30.
Right?
Yeah.
We appreciate a lot.
Well, thank you. I appreciate, you know, this invitation.
Your time, and that you have kept at 3:30 with us, and you have shared your thoughts, your experiences, and your time with us.
Thank you, Albert, and thank you, everyone. I really appreciate this opportunity to speak with you, and I hope we'll have a chance to share. I'll be able to show you other films in the future. I'm working.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, I'm working on I have one other film that I've just finished, which I may show you at some time, and then I'm working on a film about Freud. So you know. So
Okay.
thank you again.
Okay,
Take care.
you.
Bye
Thank
now.
you.
See you.
Bye.
Bye.